joining us. It's great to see so many familiar faces for a lot of you who are our volunteers. For those of you that aren't, but are kind of Corbridge residents or just kind of interested, um, Kathryn and I have catered this presentation primarily for you so that you feel informed. But of course, if there are any questions, please don't hesitate to ask. So what have we done and what are we planning to do? First, if you're not familiar with WallCAP, just in case there are a few people here that aren't, as Carrie said, we're funded by the National Lottery Heritage Fund. We're hosted at Newcastle University, and we are a community archaeology project. So we kind of have three overarching aims and goals that we really want to incorporate into the project that all our activities and events have been focused on. So one concern is that we want to address different questions about how Hadrian's Wall can be better managed and conserved, particularly those sites that are designated officially heritage at risk, and for which actually Corbridge, the greater Roman town of Corbridge, is one of those sites. And we'd like to have a better understanding of the long-term life and history of Hadrian's Wall and the surrounding land. And we're looking at that through a program we call Stone Sourcing and Dispersal. So that's investigating kind of the stone fabric of Hadrian's Wall. But the other thing is we really want to make sure that Hadrian's Wall is embedded within local communities, that the people, the residents and communities that live along or near or even quite far from Hadrian's Wall have an understanding of Hadrian's Wall and how it is important for the history of this area and this region, even if you're not particularly into the Romans or particularly excited by the Romans. Actually, Hadrian's Wall has played a very big part in local history. So those are the three sort of overarching aims of the project. And as I said, Corbridge fits into our heritage at risk strand. And I will explain that a little bit more in just a few moments. I think the thing that's really important to point out is that Corbridge is the northernmost town of the Roman Empire. So if you look on a map of the Roman Empire, you will not see any towns of a more northern latitude than Corbridge. It beats Carlisle by maybe 1 degree latitude, but together Corbridge and Carlisle are the two northernmost towns. They're also the only two towns in proximity to Hadrian's Wall. Now there are there's a number of forts that are built along the line of the wall, and those forts have quite large settlements that grow up outside of them. And you could call those kind of semi-urban communities. But in terms of a proper town with a town council and all the sort of facilities you'd expect with a town, that's Carlisle and Corbridge. So today we see Corbridge as a rather gentle village, with an excellent, the Corbridge larder is excellent. If you want your nice cheeses and fresh deli and such, lovely bookshops, fresh made ice cream. In Roman times, there would be some lovely temples, but it might also be a bit of a rougher place. There might be houses of ill repute, almost certainly were houses of ill repute, a number of taverns and pubs. There was lots of industrial activity going on because this is a town that's servicing the military along Hadrian's Wall. We've known historically that the Roman town of Corbridge is quite substantial. So you can see in this image here, these are bits that have been either excavated and revealed. So those are the bits that are shown in black, whereas the bits that are shown they look a bit brown. I think in the original publication, they're red. Those are bits of the Roman town that have shown up previously from historic aerial photographs. So we can track the Roman town as occupying all those fields that are just to the west of the modern village. But in fact, Roman Corbridge is far more extensive than that. One of my colleagues at Newcastle, Ian Haynes, has been conducting a number of geophysical surveys over many years. Some of you here are involved in those, which has been to geophysically survey all the fields surrounding the Roman town of Corbridge. And you can see he's gone quite far to the west. The area of Roman Corbridge is actually bigger in extent than the kind of historic medieval and early modern village of Corbridge. Corbridge as a modern village only became larger than the Roman village, actually really in the post-war era in terms of its extent. So Roman Corbridge was in many cases a much larger settlement. One of the things we're quite interested in with Corbridge, one of the reasons why it's considered a site as a heritage at risk is because Corbridge itself, of course, is part of a living landscape. There's lots of agriculture in all the fields around the modern village. And so there are questions about to what extent the archaeology survives, at what depth does it survive in terms of shallowness, and also the greatest depth, how far deep into the ground does that archaeology persist? And so the more we can answer those questions, the better we can understand how to properly manage Corbridge so that that archaeological resource lasts for future generations, while also still having it be part of a living, working landscape. So we know from past excavations that the archaeology of Corbridge has really incredible potential. So there's the Corbridge hoard, which was that fantastic bits of armor and really what's thought to now be a blacksmith's spare parts box, really, that was found in the 1950s. There's reuse of very impressive sculptural stone from Roman Corbridge and Hexham Abbey. I've just talked about how extensive the town is. But there also, you have to remember that means there's a range of buildings. There's very impressive decorated temples and other civic structures. On the screen is a lovely digital reconstruction of the aqueduct-fed fountain, which came in from the north of the town and is near the granaries that you can see on site if you visit today. But we still have all sorts of questions that we need to ask, all sorts of things that we want to learn. We know that Roman Corbridge was founded initially with a Roman fort, but there are still questions about if we have the right starting date for that. We don't know how rapidly the town expanded once it was converted from a Roman fort into a civil settlement, a town. And we really don't understand the late Roman or early post-Roman abandonment of Corbridge and the shift from Roman Corbridge east to where the modern village of Corbridge is, when we know that at least by the 9th century, you've got the lovely church at St. Andrew's being built. And that's a kind of a settlement shift. So Corbridge in some cases is never really abandoned after the Roman period, just the residence in the settlement shifts further to the east, slightly higher ground, slightly better fording point at the time as well. Now, the kind of key sites associated with Corbridge are outlined here in black. So the earliest Roman structures associated with Corbridge are the fort at Red House, or the thought to be fort at Red House, which is the circle here over on the left-hand side of your screen, which was encountered when the A69 was being constructed. So it's thought there might be more military structures in this area, but it's never really been explored. The next Roman fort was built over here, and then it was succeeded by the Roman town. And this is where the majority of things, the site museum and consolidated ruins, are on display today, in this much more lightly dashed area. That's all that remains on display. Where we'll be excavating, and where we have excavated back in 2019, is the playing field just to the north across the road from the English Heritage Roman town site. And as you can see, just to the west of the modern village. So we excavated initially in 2019. Before we did those excavations, we conducted 2 types of geophysical survey. So that's a survey technique where you're basically sending various types of signals under the ground, and then the computer is interpreting those signals as they return back. So we did a gradiometer survey, which is measuring effectively magnetic variation, and we did a resistivity survey, which is measuring electrical resistance within the soil. So the gradiometer survey and its interpretation are on the left, the resistivity survey and its interpretation are on the right. You can see the 2 surveys bring up slightly different results. And we'll sometimes show you, especially if you look at the colored images at the bottom half of the screen, in terms of the interpretations of what you can see. By doing this survey, we were able to see that, yes, there do appear to be some structures still existing in the ground. Particularly notable is this very dark structure here, and the resistivity, which over here is a much more light and granular, that we think is a Roman road. And so that allowed us to place our trenches in 2019. So our 2019 excavations, there were 3 trenches that we excavated. 2 of those 3 had Roman archaeology in them. The third one, which we thought might have Roman archaeology, at the end we determined was probably remains of a phase of the gardens outside Colchester House, and actually not Roman at all. So on the map here in front of you, the 2 red trenches are where we had the Roman archaeology, and the blue one, there was no Roman archaeology. And you can see the excavations in progress there. That's looking south. Actually, across the field is the Roman site, the English Heritage Mansions. And we made really good progress the first probably 4 or 5 days of the excavation in 2019. It was July 2019. And unfortunately, the middle of the excavation was beset, you could even say plagued or cursed, if you want to be slightly melodramatic, but by rain, and lots of it. For those of you who are able to attend, we had to kind of try and bail water out. It was a bit of a wet season in many cases anyway, so the ground wasn't absorbing the water particularly well, in contrast to this summer, which has been very dry. So we didn't really progress as much as we'd hoped to and wanted to. That said, we did encounter some very interesting archaeology. So if we look at here at Trench 1, which is the largest trench, the trench that's here in this photograph on your screen, we had a number of interesting features. So this is turned sideways, so I could make the photo as large as possible for your screens. But north is to your left. So you kind of have to imagine it's tilted clockwise, as it were, in terms of the trench. At the northern end of the trench, what we had was a very clear evidence of a ditch and some deposits to either side of it. Then we had a road surface. So that road, if you remember, came up in the geophysical survey as a nice dark line. And there was some paving beside the road and another cobbly deposit or surface, which we think may have been a paved yard. There then was this smaller curvilinear ditch, which seemed to relate to a pit. At the top of the pit actually had quite a few cobbles in it, but once you move those away, there was some pit underneath. And then there was a deposit here at the southern end, which continued much deeper and we never really were able to define. For those of you who were there, you'll recall that it was the southern end which seemed to flood quite a bit and held a lot of water. So we didn't get down as deep as we expected to. I'm not entirely convinced we ever, for example, fully revealed the extent of the road. So this ditch might be related to the road surface, and actually we still need to do more cleaning to either side of it. What's going on with this paving in this yard, for example? So there's questions that we just didn't get to finish answering with this trench itself. Over in Trench 3, we came across most immediately what looked to be a wall foundation. And then there was a deposit just inside the wall. And then as we continued to reveal the trench, there was another deposit over here and what we think is the opposite wall. So this might be a narrow building aligned north-south that would eventually abut against that road. But it was a very narrow trench just to test out the geophysics, and we'll be returning to that area again. But we have, clearly a nice Roman structure in this example. Both trenches produced bits of Roman pottery, and there were well over 50 sherds of Roman pottery, if I recall correctly. So there were examples of amphora here in the upper left. So amphora being very large, substantial pottery vessels used for carrying wine and olive oil. And these ones were, I believe, wine-bearing amphora. There was much more coarseware jars like this one here, which would be quite typical for cooking in, but also would sometimes be used as shipping containers for things like salt or other rough products. And then there were nicer bits. So here's the base of a beaker or a cup. And you can see it's a Samian ware, a terra sigillata, with that nice distinctive orange-red slip. And that would be used for drinking wine in most cases. So there was quite a nice range of pottery. The dating of the pottery tended to be 2nd to 3rd century. So we didn't have, if I recall, we didn't really have much late Roman material. So that's a bit interesting, and that tells us a bit something of what's happening at the northern fringe of the town, which is where our trenches are located. And that's what we'll be returning to. So at this point, I will hand over to Kathryn, who will be talking about what is happening this season, this July.
Thanks, Rob. Yeah, so we're really excited to head back to the playing fields, and we actually will be opening up the trenches tomorrow, and we'll be digging until the 28th of July. So what you can see here on your screen is some of the geophysical survey results with our trench locations on top of that. And you can see we've had a few iterations of where we wanted to put things, but our final decision for this year are the red boxes. And so the trench 4, which is the sort of one that's slightly further to the west, that sits on top of the biggest trench from 2019. So we're kind of overlapping with that so we can further explore the road and the features that were exposed there. And then trench 5 we've placed because you can see, well, one of the trenches was there as well, just that really small one. But we really want to explore what that sort of little rectangular structure, what that appears to be a rectangular structure is. on the geophys. So we want to have a look at that. And with the 2019 excavations, because of the rain, essentially we got down to the archaeology, but we weren't really able to get through it. And so to see what was underneath. So we really want to be able to explore the full depth of those features this year. So that's our goal with the digging this year, is to really get all the way through all of the archaeological layers and get a full understanding of this area as far as its kind of time depth as well. So we'll have volunteers on site for those 3 weeks pretty much. And you're more than welcome to come visit if you're a resident of Corbridge or the area. And we have one volunteer on site who's also going to be sort of our visitor engagement volunteer. And so they'll be there to answer lots of questions about what we've been finding, show you some of the finds and things like that. So we'll have lots of opportunity to kind of get you involved in what we've been discovering. So yeah, so we're really looking forward to that. And just one note though, if you are coming out to site to have a visit, we're just asking that people don't post anything on social media at the moment. And that's just to keep the site as safe as possible from any unwanted visitors coming in and having their own excavations when they shouldn't be. So we're just trying to keep things quiet for the time being. And Rob, do you want to go to the last slide? Yeah, so thank you so much for joining us tonight. And I hope that was informative for you for what we found and what we're hoping to do this year. If you're wanting to follow along with more from the dig, you can check us out on our Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And we will be posting some updates there throughout the dig. They'll just be a bit sort of spaced out so that we're not drawing too much attention to what we've done while we've got the ground open, but we'll be posting lots of things as well after the dig is finished and we're starting to get more results.
Thank you, Kathryn. And I think that is all from us. So at this point, we're really happy to answer any questions you have or to talk through anything further that we glossed over or went through too quickly.